You are watching this right now because something explosive, humiliating, and utterly unprecedented has just detonated on the global stage. Meghan Markle, once Duchess of Sussex, once welcomed into the inner sanctum of Buckingham Palace, once seated beside Queen Elizabeth II herself, has allegedly been rejected at the Dubai border, and behind that rejection lies a whisper of a secret warning from Prince William that may have sealed her fate forever. This is not a petty airport delay. This is not a paperwork glitch. This is a geopolitical slap heard across continents, according to the explosive account detailed in the original report. Picture this: the private arrival, the expectation of diplomatic courtesy, the quiet confidence of a woman who once walked through palace gates as a senior royal. Dubai, playground of billionaires, sanctuary of influencers, a place where luxury is currency and power is perfumed, was supposed to be the reset button, the grand reinvention, the escape from the tightening circle of criticism in California. Instead, insiders claim her passport triggered a premeditated pause, not an arrest, not a scene, something colder, more calculated. She was reportedly escorted to a private questioning suite and left waiting, minutes stretching into hours. The shift from entitlement to uncertainty hanging thick in the air. Let that sink in. A woman who once stood on the balcony of Buckingham Palace, now sitting under fluorescent airport lighting while officials, unmoved by celebrity, quietly review her file. The same narrative describes how this wasn't routine. Her name was flagged immediately. This wasn't chaos. It was choreography. And in a region where monarchy is sacred currency, the optics of hosting someone perceived as publicly at war with her former royal house apparently raised red flags. Because here's the part no PR machine can spin: the United Arab Emirates has deep, strategic, generational ties with the United Kingdom. Trade, security, diplomacy woven tightly together. The Gulf monarchies operate on loyalty codes older than most Western republics. And when they allegedly examined the patterns surrounding Meghan, the interviews, the Netflix expos, the Oprah bombshells, the repeated public grievances, they did not see rebellion. They saw volatility. They did not see empowerment. They saw unpredictability. The report paints a brutal picture. To Emirati decision makers, this was about risk assessment, about protecting a meticulously cultivated global brand, about avoiding imported controversy. The phrase that echoes like a diplomatic death sentence: unacceptable reputational risk. Those three words are colder than any tabloid headline. They mean doors close quietly and permanently. And just when you think that humiliation was the bottom, the story claims the pivot to Saudi Arabia was already in motion. Not a vacation inquiry, not a casual visit. Allegedly, quiet back-channel communication seeking something far more strategic: protection, prestige, a sanctuary within another royal ecosystem, a backup plan, a royal adjacent lifeline. But the Saudi response, according to the same narrative, was even more decisive. They didn't just decline. They reportedly conducted a deep review of her history since 2016. Every public fracture, every allegation, every legal entanglement. And then came the line that chills: we respect royalty. We do not host people who disrespect theirs. If true, that sentence alone detonates the illusion that reinvention is always possible. Because in monarchies that measure time in centuries, loyalty isn't branding, it's blood. But here's where the temperature spikes even higher. The rumor that transformed this from rejection into chessboard strategy whispers in London that a quiet diplomatic heads-up traveled through elite intelligence channels. Not an official decree, not a public condemnation, a warning. And at the center of those whispers, Prince William, the future king, the silent brother who has endured years of public accusations without televised retaliation. The narrative suggests that when Gulf officials inquired, a comprehensive dossier existed, not gossip, not tabloid clippings, allegedly internal staff complaints, timelines of public attacks contrasted with continued use of royal titles, documented legal battles, a portrait of pattern over PR. And in regions where loyalty and stability outrank celebrity, that portrait may have spoken louder than any streaming contract ever could. If this is true, it marks a seismic shift in royal strategy. The old motto, never complain, never explain, evolving into something surgical. Protect the institution at all costs. No public screaming match, no press conference, just facts quietly placed on the right desks at the right moment. If William indeed let the truth speak for itself, then this wasn't retaliation. It was insulation. Meanwhile, back in Montecito, the California fortress that once symbolized independence reportedly feels less like a palace and more like a pressure cooker. The Spotify fallout, the Netflix momentum cooling, the lifestyle brand still struggling to solidify beyond curated glimpses. Maintaining a $14 million estate with private security and luxury overhead requires relentless revenue. And the narrative circulating is that the financial and social glow is dimming. Hollywood's loyalty is transactional. If you bring prestige, you're embraced. If you bring drama without profit, invitations evaporate. The Montecito dream was supposed to prove they didn't need the crown. But what happens when the crown shadow is gone, and so are the open doors abroad? What happens when two of the most powerful monarchies in the Middle East reportedly decide the cost outweighs the benefit? This isn't just about one airport rejection. It's about a pattern catching up, about geopolitics colliding with personal branding, about ancient institutions pushing back quietly but effectively. When one door closes, you pivot. When two doors slam in different countries, it starts to feel like a verdict. And the most haunting part? The idea that this wasn't a loud confrontation. It was silence, polite, firm, final, no dramatic expulsion. Just a message delivered in the most devastating way possible: access denied. The world that once seemed hypnotized by her narrative may now be recalibrating. The sympathy currency that powered the early years of departure from the royal family may be reaching its expiration date in elite diplomatic circles. Because in environments where loyalty equals survival, perceived betrayal is radioactive. So now the question lingers like smoke after a fire: was this merely bureaucratic caution, or was it the invisible hand of palace strategy ensuring that independence truly meant independence without the invisible safety net of royal prestige? One rejection could be dismissed as misunderstanding. Two rejections in two powerhouse regions? That feels coordinated. That feels intentional. That feels like the moment reinvention collided with reality. And if Prince William truly stood in the shadows, not shouting, not accusing, but simply ensuring the full story traveled ahead of her, then the chessboard has changed forever. The future king didn't need a microphone. He needed timing. And now the temperature rises even higher. Because what happened after those doors allegedly closed was not quiet acceptance, it was fury, disbelief, and the terrifying realization that the reinvention machine might finally be running out of fuel. Imagine the psychological whiplash. One moment you believe you are positioning yourself as a global power player beyond the monarchy, and the next you are confronting the possibility that the very institution you criticize still holds more invisible influence than you ever calculated. Because this wasn't Hollywood gossip. This wasn't British tabloid spite. This was the Middle East, where monarchy is not symbolic theater but a living, breathing axis of power. Let's talk about the humiliation factor that no one wants to say out loud. Being declined by Dubai is one thing. Being labeled a reputational risk by Saudi decision makers is something else entirely. That phrase doesn't just close doors, it echoes through diplomatic circles. It becomes shorthand. It travels. And in elite environments where discretion and stability are prized above celebrity, that kind of label sticks like permanent ink. The whisper campaign becomes a wall. And here's where the alleged William factor becomes nuclear. Because if, and that's the word everyone clings to, if a quiet dossier truly circulated through diplomatic channels, then what we are witnessing is not revenge but containment. A future king protecting the architecture of monarchy by ensuring that any nation considering offering sanctuary had the complete picture, not the glossy streaming series version, not the curated Instagram aesthetic, the full timeline, the staff complaints, the Megxit negotiations, the Oprah allegations, the Netflix narrative, the legal entanglements, the pattern. William has always played the long game. He doesn't erupt publicly. He absorbs, he watches, he calculates. While his brother and sister-in-law told their story to cameras, he allegedly allowed the institutional memory of the palace to quietly compile receipts. And when Gulf officials made inquiries, the silence broke, not through headlines, but through private briefings. In royal ecosystems built on loyalty, that information becomes decisive. Now think about the strategic brilliance of that move if it happened. No public mudslinging, no counter-interview, no emotional rebuttal, just letting foreign decision-makers evaluate the risk independently with access to unfiltered data. That is power without noise. That is chess, not checkers. And if two of the most influential monarchies in the Middle East independently reach the same conclusion, that conclusion reverberates. Meanwhile, the California narrative is shifting from glossy liberation to high-stakes survival. The Montecito estate, once framed as proof of independence, reportedly feels heavier now. The Spotify fallout wasn't just a canceled contract, it was a public branding bruise. The The Netflix partnership hasn't generated the unstoppable wave many predicted. The lifestyle launch remains embryonic. Security costs don't disappear. Property taxes don't negotiate. Staff salaries don't pause because headlines change. And Hollywood is ruthless. It embraces you when you trend upward. It quietly withdraws when the trajectory wobbles. The power lunches, the billionaire neighbors, the high-profile friendships that once signaled acceptance into America's elite, those optics have grown quieter. In a town obsessed with association, reputational risk is contagious. If Dubai and Riyadh signal caution, Los Angeles listens. The deeper psychological twist is this: the entire departure from royal life was framed as escape from suffocating tradition. But what if tradition still dictates access? What if the crown's shadow, even from a distance, remains longer than expected? Independence without institutional insulation means facing every consequence alone. And if William's alleged intervention ensured that insulation disappeared internationally, then the game changed overnight. There's also the issue of pattern recognition, the phrase that haunts this entire saga. Every controversy, every fractured partnership, every dramatic reveal, every lawsuit, every public grievance. When decision makers evaluate risk, they don't isolate incidents, they analyze trends. And trends, according to the narrative circulating, did not favor her. Imagine the private conversations now unfolding behind closed doors in Montecito. The realization that Middle Eastern sanctuary is off the table. The awareness that global monarchies are aligned not through emotion, but through shared values of loyalty and discretion. The understanding that public sympathy has limits when contrasted with institutional endurance. That is a chilling recalibration. Because here is the brutal truth beneath all the spectacle: monarchy is not celebrity. Celebrity is volatile. Monarchy is structural. Celebrity thrives on attention. Monarchy thrives on continuity. When those two forces collided, one had centuries of diplomatic alliances backing it. The other had streaming contracts and public interviews. And in the corridors of geopolitical power, continuity wins. And what about Harry in all of this? The prince who once walked shoulder to shoulder with his brother, now reportedly watching as that same brother's influence shapes outcomes continents away. The emotional complexity there is staggering. Loyalty to spouse versus legacy of birth. Independence versus inheritance. Public grievance versus institutional memory. If William truly ensured that key allies saw the full context, then Harry faces an impossible paradox. The family he distanced himself from may still be determining the boundaries of his global acceptance. The phrase "one door is a mistake, two doors is a verdict" lingers for a reason. Dubai alone could be chalked up to caution. Saudi Arabia alone could be dismissed as conservative protocol. Together, they feel coordinated. Whether formally or informally, the message is clear: royalty in the East does not reward perceived betrayal of royalty in the West. And here's the most devastating twist: the silence. No dramatic press conference, no fiery rebuttal, just access quietly denied. That kind of rejection hurts more than public condemnation because it leaves no stage to fight back on. You cannot debate a closed door. You cannot spin a visa denial into empowerment. You can only pivot again. But how many pivots remain? The California dream was built on the assumption that the world would always be captivated, that media cycles could be managed, that sympathy could be renewed. But geopolitical rejection operates differently. It doesn't care about trending hashtags. It doesn't negotiate with PR teams. It weighs alliances, tradition, and risk, and it acts. If Prince William was indeed the unseen architect of this invisible barrier, then this marks the moment he stepped out of passive endurance and into active protection. Not with outrage, with precision. He didn't shout. He didn't retaliate publicly. He simply ensured that the institution's perspective traveled farther than the grievance narrative. And in diplomatic ecosystems, perspective shapes policy. So where does this leave Meghan Markle? Allegedly a duchess without a diplomatic foothold in regions that value monarchy most intensely. Allegedly navigating a Hollywood environment growing cautious. Allegedly confronting financial realities that don't align with royal-scale lifestyle without royal-scale backing. It leaves her in a position she never expected, outside both worlds. The world has not exploded in scandal over this because the most powerful messages rarely do. They move in whispers, in briefings, in nods between officials who understand what is unsaid. The Middle East didn't need to issue a statement condemning her. The denial itself was the statement. And perhaps the most haunting realization of all is this: you can walk away from an institution, but that institution may not walk away from you, especially when its future king is prepared to defend its integrity globally. Reinvention requires access. Access requires trust. And trust, once fractured in royal ecosystems, is almost impossible to rebuild. If Dubai and Saudi Arabia truly reach the same conclusion independently or with a subtle nudge from from London, then this is no longer about personality clashes or tabloid theatrics. It is about geopolitical positioning. The fairy tale departure promised freedom, the global backlash may have delivered isolation. And somewhere between Montecito and Buckingham Palace, between streaming deals and diplomatic dossiers, the power balance recalibrated. Two doors closed, not slammed publicly, closed quietly, firmly. And in that silence, the loudest message of all echoed, the world's oldest institutions still know how to protect themselves.